guys. So today we're going to be starting part one of a two-part presentation on rhetorical appeals, academic persuasion, and logic. So we're going to be talking a little bit about how rhetorical appeals is one sort of strategy within rhetorical knowledge, just like considering different modes, considering different genre features, thinking about what your audience needs, all of those things. And then we're also going to be going over each of 4 different appeals. We're going to be doing practice specifically with 3 of them, and you have an activity that you're going to be doing. And then we're going to kind of focus more on the logic end, a little bit more heavily on Wednesday. So we're going to go ahead and get started with part 1, which is just rhetorical appeals. This is the shorter of the 2 presentations. Where we're going to start is just looking at the rhetorical triangles. This is just a picture that kind of shows all 4 appeals kind of in context. So there are four appeals. I know a lot of people who have covered the rhetorical triangle before, talked about rhetorical appeals, have covered 3. And the 3 that people have usually covered are ethos, which is credibility. I've actually used that term a good bit this semester already in terms of you checking your authors of your sources, credibility, checking their sources, thinking about their bias, thinking about their expertise, things like that. And when you're thinking about ethos, the reason why kind of wanted to go over the rhetorical triangle is just to also show like how this fits into the writing situation. Remember, writing situations, or all communication situations, have those 3 parts. You have the writer, you have the genre or the type of text, and the text itself, the thing that you're using to communicate, and then you also have the audience. So you're also thinking about ethos is the trustworthiness of the writer. It's how, if you're the author of that text, you're building up that sense of trust, your own credibility with your audience. If you're thinking about logos, that refers specifically to the text, the message, the reasons that you're giving people. If you're thinking about pathos, that specifically kind of focuses on the audience. So each of these 3 appeals kind of focuses on what you're doing with a different part of the writing situation. And then we're going to go over the 4th appeal and the lesser talked about appeal, which is Kairos, which kind of applies more to the actual context of the writing situation. It has to do with how current and relevant and timely the argument that you're making is. So we're going to go first into just kind of an overview of the rhetorical appeals. 1, rhetorical appeals and rhetorical knowledge are not the same thing. Rhetorical knowledge is that sort of umbrella, sort of all-encompassing knowledge of how writing situations work, and it includes knowing the components of the writing situation you have to think about, and also thinking about the strategies that you have to communicate in that situation. And those strategies include, considering modes, thinking about genre features, thinking about or anticipating your audience needs, thinking about whatever the in this case, the academic features are, thinking about clarity, thinking about those kinds of things. And also thinking about rhetorical appeals, thinking about how you are going to appeal to your audience and make a well-rounded argument by thinking about trust, by thinking about solid logic and reasoning, and by thinking about emotion, by thinking about your audience's concerns. So they are not the same. Rhetorical appeals is part of rhetorical knowledge, but they're not the same thing. One is the full scope of the knowledge and understanding of writing situations, for one is the strategy. So we do use rhetorical appeals in all forms of communication. Each one focuses on that different piece of the writing situation, and we do this every day, whether we realize it or not, because all well-rounded writing situations use all 3 to some degree, especially persuasive ones. And as I keep, going back to, all writing or almost all writing is a little bit persuasive anyway, because there's a person in control of it who, does have their like little biases, and you select the information that you show people. So there's a little bit of persuasion in just about everything. And we use these appeals every day, whether you realize it or not. For example, if you wanted to borrow money from someone, you would first explain your situation and explain why maybe you need the money and give them good reasons for it. and that would be logos. To get them to see like how like giving you this money, like it makes sense because you need it, like those good reasons. You might even try to get them to feel bad for you a little bit, try to gain some sympathy about how much, you really need this money and why, like what it's going to help you with and why, why you can't afford to do this without borrowing money. And sometimes that includes also like, gaining a little bit of sympathy. And then you would also, you want them to trust you and believe that you're going to pay this money back. So you give them good reasons like how, I have, a job or I have a paycheck coming in, so this is just a loan as soon as I get my paycheck, and this is telling them the day and time so they know like when you're going to get paid and all this stuff, and giving them reasons to believe that you're going to pay them back, and that's trust. And any good communication needs all three of those senses between the writer and the audience. And we're going to go into a little bit because we are going to talk about pathos, and pathos is emotion. And we're going to spend some time specifically talking kind of about pathos because there's kind of this myth that pathos is like the devil because it's emotion, and writing should never have emotion in it because that's bias and all this stuff. The truth is that pathos is easily abused because emotion is very persuasive, and because we do tend, when we're talking about things that we have opinions about, tend to be overly emotional. And pathos is one of those things that it's not that you shouldn't use it, and almost all writing calls for some degree of pathos because it means a lot more than just emotion. But the problem with where people are and what they've learned about pathos is that we tend to think it's just emotion and it's just about manipulation, and it's not. However, it can be. So you do have to keep it balanced, and you have to pay attention to whether or not you're using pathos in the right ways. Whether or not you're using it to support things that you're talking about, and to keep your audience engaged, and whether or not you're using it fairly, or whether or not you're kind of going overboard and being overly emotional, and revealing a lot of bias and possibly be offending your audience or possibly manipulating them. And so it's pathos is tricky. So we're going to start with Kairos, which is the first of the four appeals. We are going to be doing more in terms of practice with the other three, but I want to introduce this idea. It's the lesser known of the four, and it's a strategy that is going to be kind of helpful to think about with your digital essay, and with making it something that is current and timely, and part of the conversation, a relevant part of the conversation. So Kairos it's about context and timing. Some keywords that go along with it are timeliness, appropriateness, decorum, opportunity. It's about taking advantage of the moment, saying the right thing at the right time. And so because Kairos, because it's more about like the whole context, it's a little bit more abstract and situational. It really shows, or it really is about taking into consideration like a deep, or using a deep understanding of like individual rhetorical situations, knowing like what to say, when to say it. It's more big picture. It's a little difficult to provide like exact or concrete like examples and strategies, but one thing I would throw out there is the I have a dream speech. If you think about like what you know about that speech, like as soon as I say like I have a dream, everybody knows what I'm referring to because it is an example of a speech that is like a picture perfect example of Kairos, of context and timing and saying and delivering the right message, the right thing at the right time. For your essay, one thing to think about is making sure that you are saying something that is relevant, current, and contributes something now. That's not just rehashing things that have already been said, things that are old, writing a report. You want to think about first using only the most current examples, events, and information. Unless you're have one or more background sections that are for history, or you're trying to use history to make a comparison, and that's why you're using past events. You don't want to use outdated information to make a point now, or events that are 20 years old when there are current events happening right now that a reader would expect you to talk about. Use strategies that make the problem interesting and relevant to the reader, which gets back to showing how this issue is significant and important now. Use strategies to convince the audience how important it is to tackle the problem, or to tackle this issue right now. So when you're thinking about these two things together, you want to make sure that readers can see that it's interesting and relevant. They can engage with it at a human level, which is where kind of pathos comes in, and making sure they see how important it is to tackle it. And also make sure you're not saying the wrong thing to the reader. And a lot of that is about tone and wording and paying attention to your audience, and making sure that you're not, again, an example of the wrong thing would be something that's going to be offensive to the reader, something that's not really going to be taking their concerns or their points into consideration, something that's going to be using outdated information. So the goal is to say, the right thing at the right time. Pay attention to the current context, pay attention to timeliness, pay attention to your wording and your tone when it comes to your audience. The next thing is pathos, and I am going to use examples of advertisements as I'm going through this, because we're going to be using advertisements for our examples, because they're short, easy visual examples to use and really easy to talk about, and really easy ways to notice. We're starting with pathos because I want to spend a little bit of time with it, because again, it's the one that's kind of demonized the most. It does refer to emotion, but if you think about, and one way to remember what it is that pathos relates to the audience. And sometimes people confuse pathos and ethos because of the E in emotion, like emotion, ethos. But you want to think about, like, path is the root for all of our emotion words, like sympathy, empathy, apathy, lack of emotion, pathetic, pathology. We have that root there. But it also refers to a lot of other things that are appropriate to think about. It relates to our imagination, the way we connect to each other, and our sense of humanity. Now, so one of the ways I think you can use pathos appropriately is like visual examples, visual aids, things that help us imagine the importance or depth in a situation. For example, if you're thinking about an advertisement and you're thinking about an ad, if I said, what is an ad that really evokes emotion, the first thing you'd probably think about is those ASPCA ads that have, like, they show you the sad dogs, and they have the Sarah McLachlan songs playing in the background, and the dogs are always like shaking and sick and behind cages, and you might think that that's too much, but at the same time, kind of making that point is it helps us see and visualize. And when you don't have pictures that you can show people, you'll try to use that descriptive language and imagery and things that help people see how important an issue is, or even to help see what you're talking about, because that's how we process information. Pathos is really important when it comes to teaching and helping people understand what things are and seeing the significance of it, because we think in images, we think in examples, and things that we can relate to, and that helps us make that connection, that helps us process and understand what people are talking about. It also deals with our sense of humanity, which is kind of where our emotions come in, but also like our sense of identity. Now, when you're thinking about like our humanity, it relates to our ability to be able to empathize with others, and the reason why it's audience is it's letting the audience see the person behind the text. Whereas, we were talking about the antidote, the goal was not to see the person behind the text. When you're thinking about using pathos, you're thinking about letting them see the person behind the text and the stake and the importance of the issue, which is important when you're persuading. Some of you are raising awareness. Your goal is to get people to engage and to see how important it is. So you need imagination. You need to get the readers to care. You need them to see that you care. You need them to see your connection to the issue, and that's very important. So there are some reasons to use pathos. It's very persuasive, and it's the most abused it is, but I'm going to go through just the list of examples also down here at the bottom. So it is that appeal to emotion, like fear, humor, anger, insecurity. You'll notice in advertisements. One of my favorite examples is an advertisement. If you've ever seen like before and after, a before and after picture of like someone selling like a weight loss product. Think about those before and after pictures. Like there's supposed to kind of be a good reason to say like, well, here's proof that it works. But there's a lot of other things going on in there. Like if you, let's say it's a woman in the picture, you'll notice she's more, in the first one, she's more washed out. She's not wearing makeup. Her hair doesn't even look like it's been washed. She's slumped over. She's wearing frumpy clothes. She looks like more just sad about life. Cut to she's not smiling. Cut to the picture at the after picture. It's not just that she's thinner. Her posture is improved. She's smiling. Usually her teeth look whiter. There's more color in the photo in general. Her hair's been done. Like there's more of that sense of like the suggestion that she is missing something in her life in the first picture, and she's found it. She's happier and more satisfied in the second picture. So there's some like suggestive ways that we work this in. Maybe draw from spirituality, religious traditions and examples to connect with people, stories or testimonials, personal anecdotes. Your personal experience has a place in a digital essay because personal experience actually relates to all three appeals at one time, and it is possible for things to overlap, for it to make more than one appeal. Personal experience lets the reader see your humanity, so it shows your connection. It also builds your ethos, because if you also have credibility and you're using credible sources, it also helps people see how you have a potential like stake in connection and personal experience, so it can make you more trustworthy. It can also be used as a type of evidence in combination with other things. So it can relate to all three. You have to be really careful with personal experience because you don't want it to be the only thing that you're basing a point on. Because it's not evidence in and of itself. It's not true because it happened to you once when you were 5. But if you have personal experience that also goes along with like expert sources, and also goes along with other stories, and also goes along with lots of other types of evidence and statistics, it can really help build an extra layer to what you're talking about. Imagery and figurative language that provides an emotional response, visual images or words to try to get people to empathize and have compassion. Powerful words, phrases, images that stir up emotion. Details that come from possible like subjective reporting. We see that in news a lot. I guess another example of an ad that might use pathos a little in a ways when we see celebrities a lot in advertisements. But that's not necessarily, sometimes we'll see that as almost like a reason to trust it, when in actuality, when you pull in a celebrity to endorse your product, a lot of times you're just pulling in a fancy name, someone that people admire, or someone like if it's, a model selling a product, is because you want to look like them. Like it's targeting an insecurity. It's bringing in someone you admire, want to look like, be like, emulate. And that's another appeal to emotion. We'll bring in celebrities to endorse political ideas, to get people to eat at restaurants, to do all kinds of things. That's another way that will appeal to emotion. Ethos is the writer. We've talked a lot about this. It's the way that you get your reader to see that you are trustworthy. It's ethic. It actually ethos translates to the word ethics, which isn't necessarily the same as morals, because morals are more based on personal values. When we're thinking about ethics, we're thinking more about having trustworthy character and credibility and having authority. There are two types of ethos. Extrinsic which is your personal credibility. In terms of your expertise and your authority. So it's whether or not you are a professor, or whether or not you're published, or whether or not you have professional experience in that field. Like it's your actual like expertise and background that you could record or state. Whereas intrinsic is more built into the writing. It's your fair-minded tone with other perspectives. It's your confidence in how you write, and in your own perspectives. It is your use of sources. It's built into the writing. So extrinsic is whether or not you are or are not an expert in the issue, and intrinsic is what you're kind of focusing on in your essay, because you might not have specific expertise in that issue, but you're pulling in from outside sources. You're using a fair tone. You're addressing other perspectives. There's a lot of ways that you're sort of practicing this. You're citing your sources. You are practicing paraphrasing well and practicing academic argument. So that's really more what you're kind of focusing on. So a couple of other kind of examples just to kind of list some things out. Appealing to the writer or speakers like qualifications or character. So qualifications are more that extrinsic. Your credible use of sources is more coming out of the writing. It's intrinsic. Accurate citations, experience and authority. So, the person knows the issues or has experience in the field. So if that's you, that would be like an extrinsic example of expertise. Whether or not you're using appropriate language. So you're using the language of the discipline. That shows expertise. And that also has to do with intrinsic ethos. If you are using the scholars and you're using the expert terminology and you're able to explain it well, it builds your trustworthiness. Having an appropriate tone, showing that you know the audience, you know the context of the situation, you're well versed. Humility, not being overly emotional and considering other perspectives fairly, like giving credit where credit's due. Tentative yet authoritative language. So you want to be authoritative and you want to be authoritative and you want to be confident, but you don't want to be absolute or sweeping, because that gets along the lines of being overly emotional. Everyone is doing this. This will always work. This is the only way to do it. People who believe that are always this, or never think this way, or never consider this. The research, you want to instead say things like, the research suggests that some experts believe, in my experience, often this happens. Things that show that you are being fair and rational about how you're thinking about the situation. And then, correct use of grammar and language. That's where the grammar comes in too. If you're thinking about advertisements, the way we're going to practice, you might think about also like appealing to like reputation, like things that say like, I've been around, we've been proudly serving since 1893, because it's an established reputation. Appeal or relying on a well-known brand, or a name, that kind of thing. If they are bringing in experts, like not bringing in a celebrity to sell your weight loss product, but bringing in a doctor or a nutritionist, using a dentist to sell a toothpaste, that kind of thing. So we're going to go on to logos, which is the final of the 4. And it's kind of the base appeal for everything, because it is the text itself. And one of the ways I want to talk about like logos being the message and logos being logic, is that a list of facts is not logic. A list of facts might be evidence that you can use, but it's not necessarily logic in and of itself. Logic is having your message make sense, not necessarily getting the other side to completely agree with you or to win, as we've talked about with popular argument. It speaks back to the goal, like what we try to get to with academic argument, which is having the reader see how what you're saying makes sense and is worth considering. So it's a little bit more of a middle ground there in terms of pushing the conversation forward. You want what you're saying to make sense. So you want to have solid reasons that are believable. You want to have evidence that you can support those reasons with, and you want to have examples that you've come up with and explanations to help explain those ideas. Again, having reasons and having evidence is great, but if your readers don't understand the reasons and evidence, it doesn't make sense to them, then you've lost them. What you're saying needs to be fair, it needs to be logical, it needs to make sense. So you have to have the reason, you have to have the evidence, and then you have to have a way of making it make sense to your reader, of having examples and explanation and ways of talking about the evidence to your reader so that they can see that it makes sense. So you might have some of these types of evidence. You might have examples, you might have personal experience, historical precedents, You might have anecdotes and hypothetical situations. Again, a lot of that comes back to trying to explain kind of something you're trying to say. You might have expert support, facts, case studies, credible experiments, definitions of terms, explanation of the ideas and evidence you've presented. You might have some cause and effect type things. You might have details from objective reporting. You might have logical reasons and explanation, statistics, all kinds of things. Then the goal is to get something well-rounded. Again, just like you don't want to have personal experience, you don't just want to have case studies. You want to be able to combine several things together. So an expert support and statistics and your own examples, and be able to bring things together and be able to talk about it and explain it. That's at the heart of your argument, not the evidence that you copy and paste, but how you set it up and what you have to say about it is the heart of your argument. It is a little harder sometimes to find logos in advertisements. If you'll notice, we'll go back to the Jaguar commercial that we watched in class. It had lots of pathos, lots and lots of pathos. It did sort of have some implied ethos because it relied on the fact that you knew and already kind of trusted the name Jaguar and already knew what it was. So I had an established reputation. There wasn't a lot of logic, and we even talked about the fact that they actually say in the commercial that Gorgeous has no love for logic, which was convenient, again, because they didn't have any logic in the commercial, because the logic in that ad would have been talking about the car itself. Good reasons to buy the car, the quality of the car, things like that, and it was missing. So a lot of ads are really heavy on pathos and even sometimes on ethos, but not always on logos, because that actually means giving reasons and evidence for the product itself. It could be comparisons. So that before and after and that testimonial could be a good reason. It could also be ethos because, you're getting a testimonial in there. You're bringing in someone who's used the product. So again, you can get more than one appeal in the same thing. It could be, so if you've ever shown seen the paper towel commercials where they show how one, works and one doesn't, assuming that those aren't staged, which of course they are, that would be an example of something you would use for, that would be evidence. When they show statistics, and you have to be careful with statistics because statistics, we love to see them, and they're actually they can be an emotional appeal too if they're, surprising or shocking, but in advertisements, a lot of times you'll notice they throw them out there without a lot of ways to know if you can trust them. For instance, all toothpaste seem to be recommended by 9 out of 10 dentists, so that's a little sketchy. But again, sorry. But just you might notice in advertisements as you're coming across them, if they have reasons why that product is more convenient, why it's better, why it works, then that would be logic in their message. And in your argument, in your essay, it's being able in each of your sections to have different types of evidence and being able to provide context and explanation and coming up with your own examples and ways of talking about and presenting the information, making what you're saying make sense to the reader. So we're going to do a little bit of practice. I'm going to explain a little bit about the ad on the next page. And it does have examples. We're not going to do Kairos. I picked a little bit of an older example. We're going to do ethos, pathos, and logos because it does have all three. In your notebook, I'm going to kind of read through it, and then I want you to take a few minutes and write down just at least one thing that you notice for each of the appeals. So one thing you notice is ethos, one that's pathos, one that's logos. So here is the ad. This is Jessica Alba. You're already noticing, maybe if you know who she is, this is a little bit of an older ad. But this is Custom Creations Foundation. So one of the reasons why I picked this ad is because it does have all three, and it's very concise. So we get all of the appeals in a very small, easy to analyze ad. So the way the product works, which you might need some context for that, is that you notice it has light and dark on either side, and as you turn the dial up here, it mixes the makeup for you to get the right tone. So you can follow me on this, gone are the days of having to go to Walmart and walk through the cosmetics line and put your arm under that plastic sheet to try to tell, you might not be following me on this, but to see like what shade like disappears on your arm, because that's how you know which shade to pick. So you just guess which color matches. So that's what they're trying to sell here, is not having to guess what tone matches and then having it be wrong and have to come back and buy another one, but just being able to buy one bottle for anybody and mix it up yourself. So we have new up here, which makes an appeal. Using Jessica Alba makes an appeal. She also says, "This shade is mine. Go get your own." Jessica Alba. So it's a quote from her. Revlon Custom Creations, as a little trademark symbol, foundation. It says, "Finally, a foundation that lets me create my perfect shade with the simple turn of a dial. Lightweight feel, naturally flawless, SPF 15. And then in parentheses, it says, "Jessica's shade is medium and she turns to click too." And then Revlon. So pretty much everything in this ad makes some kind of appeal. I just want you to take a few minutes and see if you can notice one thing for ethos, pathos, and logos and write it down in your notebook and then come back to me. Okay, so we're going to go through a couple of these. I'm going to start with ethos, and if you missed anything, I mean, there's a couple of these, so you're welcome to like make some notes and write down some things, because this might help you with the activity that you're going to be doing on your own in a little bit. So first, the fact that it's trademark is an appeal to ethos, because it makes it seem more credible and trustworthy. Revlon, they're relying on that name. Most of you, even if you don't wear makeup, you know what Revlon is, and that's why it's the biggest part here. It's even bigger than like her quote, and I mean, it's comparable in size to like her face and the product itself, because it's one of the things that they really want you to notice and remember is the brand. Sorry, using a quote from her is a little bit eminent appeal to ethos and trust, because they really want you to believe that she uses this makeup. And also kind of saying like Jessica's shade is medium and she turns to click too. Again, they really want to hit it home and have you believe that she uses this makeup. And that's going to make it more believable and more trustworthy to have her as a spokesperson, because using her makes a couple of appeals. It's pathos and it's ethos. It's ethos, and you might see this as an unfair appeal to ethos because they're using a celebrity. It loosely can work because it's still more of an appeal to emotion, but the assumption here, and you'll see like now why they have all this extra stuff to try to get you to believe she uses it, is because we would kind of consider her as an actress, an expert in like looking pretty, and being attractive, and that if she uses this makeup, she has all the money and, you know, all the ability to buy any makeup and product that she wants, and this is what she uses, then it must work. So they need us to believe that she uses it. Now, we all know that she doesn't really probably use it. She just got paid to do the ad, but, you know, it kind of hits it home. They really want you to believe that she uses this product, and that this is, you know, what you're going to look like when you're done, right? So a couple of ways that they have some ethos in here. They do have some logic in here, some good reasons why you might want to use this product. One, it's way more convenient. The simple turn of a dial. So the fact that it's more convenient than previous products is going to be a good reason to buy it. The fact that it has a lightweight feel might be a good reason to choose this product over others. The fact that it has SPF 15 might be another good reason. So there are some reasons why you might pick this product over others. There's a lot of pathos here. Using Jessica Alba is also an appeal to pathos because it gets at that sense of identity that we talked about. A lot of advertisements work by considering their audience and considering a flaw, or what they see as a flaw or an insecurity in their audience, and showing how this product is going to meet or fulfill that need and take away that insecurity. So this, bear with me on this, it kind of says like, this is what you should look like. You don't. But if you buy our product, you could look like this. So again, like, and part of using her also is that she's a model and well known for, or not a model, but actress, and I guess a model here, and well known for being attractive. And so people want to emulate and look like her, and that's one way of saying like, we're going to fulfill this need for you. You're going to look more like her, be more beautiful like her when you use this product. There's also some emotion kind of words in here that they rely on. Custom is an emotion word. We love things that can be individualized and customized for us, and it just makes us feel good, you know? There's some other, like flawless is a nice emotion word, because, and perfect. It's going to be perfect. You're going to look flawless. So those kind of words being thrown in there, like, no, there's no way for it to be perfect or flawless, but we love to hear those words. It really gets us. New. We love to stick new on stuff. The product doesn't even have to be new. Like, it might seem like it's logic, but really, like, it's just like a catchword. Like, they will come up with new packaging. The product doesn't even have to be different. It might just be a new color, or the box has more shine and glitter on it than it did before, and they could slap that word new on it, and it gives us a little zing because it's a new thing. It's something that everybody is going to want, not everybody has yet, or maybe we assume it's going to be better for some reason, or mostly it just catches the eye because it says new, and we, again, like that emotional appeal. So there's a lot of things in here that are also appealing to emotion. So this is a good example of an ad that has all three. And of course, you might be looking at this ad and thinking, well, some of that seems like they're not really a good use of those appeals. And you're probably right. But we're going to talk more about that on Wednesday. So what your practice is going to be is you're going to go back to the agenda to complete the activity for today. We're going to do the remainder of this presentation in class on Wednesday. For today, you're going to practice finding your own advertisement and looking for how it's using some of those appeals. So you can go back to your agenda for that, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye.